The Kings' time in the postseason was short, but the Ontario Reign keep winning in the AHL playoffs. We're going to get on the Reign train next with Jared Shafran on this episode of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and we are also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, we're all disappointed the LA Kings were eliminated in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, but we still have hockey to watch in the Kings family. That's the team's AHL affiliate, the Ontario Reign, who are in the Pacific Division Finals. Here to discuss that and the team is friend of the show, Jared Shafran. He is the manager of communications and content for the Ontario Reign, contributor to LA Kings Insider, and you can hear and sometimes see him as an analyst on the Ontario Reign game broadcast. You can follow him on X and Twitter. He is at Shafrain. Hey, Jared, thanks for joining us. How you doing?
Hey, Eddie, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us after getting off a flight from British Columbia after seeing the Reign take care of business. Excited to talk to you about everything that's been going on with the Reign here, especially in the playoffs. 5 playoff games so far, 5 wins for the Ontario Reign, 4-3 over Abbotsford last night to sweep that series, a best of 5 series, 3-0. Before we get into the season and the postseason, let's talk about last night's game. I know the Reign have been rolling for the most part, but they did have to come from behind to win last night.
Yeah, it's the first time that they've had to do that in the playoffs, and it was a totally different recipe. It's funny, Eddie. I feel like at the beginning of both series that they've played, they've really just from the outset dominated their opponent. They've come out physical. They've dictated the pace of play. They've had great goaltending. But for whatever reason, in the clinching games, they've won them both, but they've started slow. They're a little tentative. Last night, it just didn't seem like they were going for the jugular, like stepping on Abbotsford's neck. And, it turned very quickly. All of a sudden, a nice deflection from Samuel Fagemo in the offensive zone off a shot from Joe Hicketts. And the game was 2-1. And I think from there, everybody kind of on the bench relaxed a little bit, got on the board and said, you know what, we're only 1 goal down. We haven't even played that well halfway through the game. And then the next shift they scored to tie the game. And then the next shift they scored. So all of a sudden they had a lead and they hadn't really even played that well. But once the Reign went into the second intermission with a 4-3 lead, they came out for the third period and played a much different game, a much simpler game, but used their defense, and they didn't really allow many chances at all over the last 20 minutes. Abbotsford really did not have many great looks. Erik Portillo made some good saves, but there wasn't any crazy diving. He was pretty in good position. The structure was there. It was more of their game that they've been playing the whole playoffs. And you know what? They came out with a victory and finished Abbotsford's season.
So I mentioned 5-0. They downed the Bakersfield Condors, the Edmonton Oilers AHL affiliate, in the best of 3 first round. So they won the 2 games, 5-1 and 3-1. And then they just wrapped a 3-game sweep of Abbotsford, the Vancouver Canucks AHL affiliate, 3-1, 4-0, and then 4-3 last night. So the Reign, they had a solid regular season, but it seems like they're having a great postseason. What has been working so well now that they've gotten in the playoffs?
Well, the first and foremost thing is that Erik Portillo has elevated his game. During the regular season, he was the starter once David Riddick was recalled by the LA Kings, and he took him a little while to understand that role at the AHL level. There's a lot more games than what he was used to than in college, and he still was splitting time in net. The Reign signed Aaron Dell, who was a factor down the stretch. Jacob Ingham played a bunch of games, so it wasn't like Portillo was night in, night out the guy. And in the playoffs, the last 2 weeks of the regular season, Marco Sturm started to lean on Portillo a little bit harder to let everybody know, hey, this is your opportunity. You got to run with it. You got to be ready. Let's get you kind of ramped up for the playoffs. He did okay in that spot at the end of regular season, but in the postseason, he has been a rock, and that's what you need. So for the first thing is their goaltending has been excellent. Portillo is at the top of the league in the playoffs as far as goals against average, save percentage, obviously wins. The Reign are, one of the first teams to advance to the next round. So I think he's been everything you would hope for and more in his first postseason in the pros, which is great. But then the other thing is, there's been total health for everybody. There's nobody out of the lineup. They have a full lineup. Everybody has played, and they haven't changed that lineup. It's been the same 20 guys with, maybe the only difference has been the backup goaltender changed this past game. It was Aaron Dell instead of Ryan Bednard. But everybody on the ice has been the exact same. And the health of this team at the right time was huge because during the regular season, almost the entire year, somebody was out of the lineup somewhere or was called up or for some reason was not with the team. And now everybody's back. And the Kings obviously being done, not that really anybody came down from the Kings, but there's nobody that's elsewhere that the Reign are waiting. They have no other excuses. They have their full lineup of everybody that they're going to have. And so just having that consistency has helped them. And I think that has really been the key is you got all your talent in the lineup and they're playing consistently.
So I'll be honest, before I started doing this show, I didn't follow the Reign that closely. I certainly knew of them. But now it's been pretty fun to learn more and more about the team and the AHL and how things are a little bit different. And I did not know that because the Ontario Reign were the lower seed against Abbotsford, they got the choice of starting at home for the first 2 games or have the potential final 3 games at home. So they took the choice of starting at home, won both of them. Then they just had to win one more on the road. So that's very interesting. Do you know who makes that call? And does that go forward in the playoffs as well? Do they continue that kind of format?
It just depends. So the AHL, as you mentioned, a little bit confusing. The Pacific Division, first and foremost, has different rules for their postseason than the other divisions. So
because of more teams
being in the Pacific Division is one of those reasons. Also, because of how far teams are spread out in the Pacific Division. You look at the North or in the Atlantic, there's a lot more bus trips. It's a lot easier for teams to go back and forth. And when you're in a playoff series, I think the league does try to minimize in the Pacific if you are a flight distance away. So I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's like 250 miles or 300 miles. If you're more than that distance away from each other, then the series format will be a 2-3. And you're right. The team that has home ice gets their choice. Obviously, it would be unfair for the home ice team to get the first 3 games. That means the series could be over before one of the teams even gets a chance to play a home game. So they don't want to have that happen. 2 years ago when they had 10 teams in the division and Ontario, it was their first year in the situation. They finished as the number 2 seed. It was I believe it was the 2022 postseason. And they finished as the 2nd seed. They defeated San Diego in the first round, that best of 3 series. And they moved on to the 2nd round. They faced Colorado, which is a further distance than the mileage there. So they had to do a 2-3. And the Reign said, we want the back 3. We want to try to maybe just split in Colorado. And then, you got an opportunity to win 2 out of 3 and win the series. And I think there was a lot of factors at play, but it did not go well. And again, some of the things we talked about, health, the Kings were still playing the Oilers in the first round. That series ended up going 7 games. It was nasty. It was rough. The Kings had to recall goaltender Matt Villalta at the time. So the Reign lost their starting goaltender. Matty V had been the starting goaltender for the Reign that whole season. And they were kind of left with a mix and match of who else had played. So for a lot of reasons why they didn't win, but they lost both games in Colorado, just like Abbotsford just lost both games in Ontario, and the Reign returned home and they were swept. They didn't have anything left in that last game. So I think there's a little bit of a scar from 2 years ago in knowing, hey, we can get these first 2 home games guaranteed up front. If we can win both of those, then you know what? We'll have a 2-0 lead like they did here. It worked out pretty much exactly to plan and only have to win 1 out of 3 on the road. Now, there's other things that come into play. Obviously, building availability, which everybody knows for the Kings is so hard. With Crypto.com Arena, they got NBA playoffs. They got other events, concerts. Same thing goes on at Toyota Arena. The arena is extremely busy this time of year. They definitely have a lot of concerts on the schedule. They also have a lot of graduations on the schedule. A lot of the high schools and local colleges out in the Ontario area and the IE, they have events there that are scheduled months and months in advance. So I think some of that does play a factor onto what dates are available, and you have to be able to work with your opponent to make sure that those work. And it's ultimately a combination of people that make that decision. Obviously, the Reign general manager, Richard Seeley, is very involved. On the hockey side, he and Marco Sturm, the head coach, come up with what they would like. Obviously, then on our business side, we have our vice president, Nate Downer. He's extremely involved with the arena as far as what is available for dates. I think there's a scenario coming up where there is a graduation in the morning and the building's actually going to change it over and get it ready for hockey to play a game at night. So there's a lot of things that we have to work out with the building to be able to do it. And it's on short notice. The building doesn't know what our schedule is going to be, who we're playing, what the seating is. And so right now, as we sit, it could be Coachella Valley, which the Coachella Valley team is number 1 in the Pacific from the regular season. They have home ice. So they would have their choice of dates first before we get to choose ours. Or if the Calgary Wranglers pull an upset and win that round, that's a completely different scenario. It's just like what we talked about, like what the Reign have against Abbotsford. So with you've got 2 completely separate date situations, and now Coachella Valley is within that mileage range. They're in Palm Desert is where their home arena is, so we can do more travel. So if that series were to happen, it would be a 2-2-1 format with Coachella Valley getting the first 2 games, the Reign then getting 2 at their place. And then if a 5th game was necessary, you can do that extra travel for 1 game because it's just a bus ride as opposed to getting everybody on a flight, baggage, and all those kind of things.
Real quick, Pacific Division final. Is it best of 5 or best of 7?
It is best of 5. It is best of 5. It's the last round that is best of 5. Once you get past this, the Western Conference final against the winner of the Central Division, and then the Calder Cup final is a traditional best of 7 series. Those are 2-3-2 traditionally, depending again on arena availability and everything. They would like to structure it again with. They wouldn't want to do a 2-2-1-1-1. That's too much travel. It would be a 2-3-2 format.
All right. Up next, we're going to get more into some of the key players that Kings fans probably know about for the Ontario area. And that's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements or else you don't pay. Find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Match, assessment, and virtual interviews. With Indeed Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you can get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description. You can invite them all to apply right away. Plus, you only pay for quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. Start hiring now with $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? Then you need Indeed. We are back with Jared Shafran of the Ontario Reign, and I want to get into some of the specific players. You already touched on Erik Portillo. He was on fire to start the playoffs. He did allow 3 goals in the last game. He had allowed a total of 3 goals in 4 games before that with a shutout, but still 5-0. So far this postseason, 1.20 goals against average, .956 save percentage. So obviously he's playing great right now. How has he progressed over the season from what you've seen in his first year of pro hockey?
Well, his confidence is really grown. I think that's the first thing. He's really comfortable with his game. He's always been comfortable with his game. He's a confident guy when he started, but you're getting used to a new league. You're getting used to a new team, teammates. I think it took him a few months to really settle in. And then, then all of a sudden it was the first part of the season was, okay, he's the backup. He's getting his playing time. He's getting starts here and there, but the Reign, their job, and I think we spoke about this, during the regular season, their job was to make sure that David Riddick was ready. If David Riddick was forced into action with the Kings, he needed to be in rhythm. He needed to be playing. So he was getting a lot of the starts, and on a back-to-back, Portillo, you'd see him in action. But I think once Riddick was recalled and was clearly going to stay with the Kings for the rest of the season, that's when, okay, now his confidence has got to grow into being the guy, the starter. Again, he didn't play every game, but he was going to be the go-to guy more often than not for Ontario. And so that took a little time and adjustment period of, okay, now this is, I'm going to be the guy here. And so I think by the time the playoffs has started, he's comfortable with the league. He's comfortable with his teammates. He's comfortable starting every night. He knows, especially right now in this Pacific Division playoffs, the Reign are playing teams they played all season. He had played a couple times in Bakersfield. Going to Bakersfield, no different than any other game during the regular season. Going to Abbotsford, he played in 3 of the 4 games that the Reign had played in Abbotsford during the regular season. So that wasn't anything that's out of his comfort zone. And, whether it's Calgary or Coachella Valley, he's had some excellent performances against both of those teams in the regular season. So it helps him prepare. He knows, some of their top players. It's not out of his comfort zone at all. Obviously, it'd be great for the Reign to maybe advance farther. And then you're talking about some different teams, some different environments, and that'd be great. The next step in his development. But I think, step by step, he's mastered everything that he needs to do. And now he's prepared. He's coming in focused and he's making big saves. The Reign didn't allow a power play goal the entire series against Abbotsford. This is a team that was really good on the power play. Some of their best players that have played in the NHL for Vancouver this year were held without a point in the series. All 3 of their top scorers were held without a point in the series. And they're going to get their chances, but Erik Portillo shut down a lot of those chances. So I think we've seen him make that gradual progression. And I think maybe even faster than what the Kings were thinking, because I don't think he's been on the radar as an NHL ready type of a player just yet, because he's just a rookie and goalies a lot of times take a little longer to develop. But we're getting to the point where maybe next year, if there was an injury, then maybe they'd want to bring him up for a start or two. I don't know that they thought that he would maybe be ready for that, but I think definitely the Kings will have Erik Portillo play in some preseason games next year and start to have him become more of a person that would be in their rotation. I don't know that, obviously with the Kings goaltending situation moving forward, it's anybody's guess what's going to happen. Yeah. It's too early right now, but I just think, when they start thinking about what are those moves going to be as they set up their goaltending for next year, now Erik Portillo is a little bit more on the radar than he was a year ago for sure.
Obviously, most fans are familiar with defenseman Brandt Clarke, former first-round pick, expected to be an impact player in LA soon. 50 games this year with the Reign, 10 goals, 36 assists for 46 points. He finished tied for 3rd in the league amongst defensemen in points, and the other 3 players ahead of him played at least 12 or more games than he did, and he was only 7 points out of being the highest scoring defenseman in the league. So the same question for you as Erik Portillo. How have you seen him progress this season? And I would ask specifically, how has he looked defensively?
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that defensively, that's where he's progressed. His offensive skills, I don't know how much more progression that I need to see from his offense. He is elite as a playmaker. He always has his head up looking to find guys. He's looking to shoot the puck and create chances on the offensive end. And as far as, just transitioning from defense to offense, he can do that immediately. And his vision is elite even at this level. So right away when he started the season, all of those things were still true. He's still doing those things, which is great. Obviously, that's his bread and butter. I think the Kings wanted him to really round himself out a little bit more on the defensive side. And again, it's not that he can't do it. I just think he, was playing in the OHL for a good part of last season. He did play, obviously, in the NHL and AHL last year. And I think in the OHL, he doesn't have to play on defense that much because he's just kind of skating past people and not having to shut people down defensively. So now you look at this guy and you want him to be able to play a lot of minutes and be a shutdown type of a player as well as an offensive player. And he started to really round himself into form. We look at all these numbers for Portillo. Well, that's the defense in front of him also is helping. And Brandt Clarke is on the ice for like 27, 28 minutes. The minutes stats are, I don't really know exactly because they don't keep them publicly in the AHL. The team does have a record of who's doing what. They have their advanced stat metrics that they get to look at. And I'm hearing from the coaching staff when I talk to them, hey, we're putting Brandt Clarke out there routinely for 25 plus minutes. We see him. He is out there accumulating a lot of minutes. He's playing in all situations. He plays obviously on the power play, but he's playing penalty kill as well. So he's playing with Joe Hicketts, who's also a guy who's pretty dynamic offensively, and they both move really well. So it's a really interesting pair with the two of them because they're able to eat up a lot of minutes, but they've become more physical and they've become much better at shutting down opponents. Marco Sturm's comfortable putting Clarke out there against any of the other team's lines, and he's out there against all of them, honestly. So that's what I think the Kings wanted to see, and I think that we started to really see him become more comfortable eating up those minutes and then also playing a much better defensive game, well-rounded game.
And another first-round pick, forward Alex Turcotte, had a relatively injury-free season. Of course, he's had some tough luck with injuries in his past. 55 games, though, for both the Kings and the Reign. Got a nice little look in L.A. 11 goals, 22 assists for 29 points in both places combined. Talk about him finally getting some good luck health-wise and how he's played this season.
Yeah, I mean, at the AHL level, he's been a top line forward for Ontario the entire season. He's a guy that drives play. Now, it's interesting that, for the Reign during the regular season, he was playing center. Marco Sturm had him exclusively at center. But as I mentioned, one of the reasons, during the regular season, somebody was out of the lineup or called up or something. There was never a situation where the Reign had all of their centers healthy and all of them down in the AHL at the same time. So a lot of times earlier in the season, Turcotte was factoring as a center because they needed him there, and he was dependable. He was great defensively, wins faceoffs, hard to play against, wins battles, great in his offense and defensive zone, just grinding out plays. And now they had a situation when Akil Thomas came back from LA after his call up with the Kings. You got TJ Tynan, who is probably the top center, maybe in the AHL. He's a veteran leader. He's the team captain. You're not going to take him out of that position. Akil Thomas has been very good on faceoffs and been very dependable. He's been great. I think the Kings maybe wanted to see him eat up some center minutes in a playoff situation. And then you've got Samuel Hellenius, who's a prospect, second-round pick. He's been great at center as well. So there's been the top three spots at the center position were kind of taken up. And so I think Marco Sturm looked at it and said, you know what? We need Alex Turcotte playing in a top six role. He needs to be playing in all situations for us. And he plays on the wing in LA, so he knows how to do that. He's starting to get more used to it. Let's put him with TJ Tynan on that top line with Samuel Fagemo, the top goal scorer on the West Coast here. So just to have those three together, I mean, I feel like they haven't even hit their stride yet. They can dominate play, but they just came together the last weekend of the regular season. This is still technically a pretty new trio. They all have extremely high talent, and their skill set is unmatched. But they're not. None of their numbers have been amazing in the playoffs. They haven't had to carry the load. I think some of the other guys have stepped up. It's been a very balanced scoring situation for Ontario in the playoffs. So Turcotte's still kind of finding his way with those other two guys, but they started in the last two games, especially against Abbotsford. They really have started to get a little more comfortable with each other. Turcotte has found the back of the net, and Samuel Fagemo scored his first goal of the playoffs in yesterday's win. TJ Tynan is always going to be on the score sheet. He always finds ways to contribute. So it's been a good trio, but I think for Turcotte, definitely I think staying healthy has helped him. But I think at this point, it's just being able to show that he can play consistently, because he was always a factor when he was healthy. It's just he wasn't healthy as much. And he hadn't put together a full, complete season. And I think now we've seen that from him. So this is an opportunity now for him to learn how to play in the playoffs, right? He's never really played in a longer playoff run. He had played some playoff games with the Reign, but I think it was only like 3 or 4 ever in his career. So his first longer playoffs with the Reign, when I mentioned 2 years ago they lost to Colorado, he was injured in that series against Colorado, and that injury set him back for a while. It didn't have a good offseason because of it. So last year, he was, again, like the Reign had 2 games in Colorado. That was it. So it wasn't really a longer playoff run like this. And this is giving him an opportunity to play some of those hard minutes, to play playoff style hockey and get himself ready for, hopefully a really good run next year where he expects to be in the NHL.
We got more with Jared Shafran coming up from the Ontario Reign. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. It is playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel's your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. Unfortunately, we don't have the Kings, Lakers, or Clippers to bet on, but how about betting against the Oilers, Nuggets, and Mavericks, who beat our LA teams? By the way, did you see Edmonton blow it against Vancouver the other night? Hey, the Dodgers are in first place and one of the favorites to win it all. It is a great time of the year to be a sports fan, and it can be even more fun by winning with FanDuel. You can bet on who will win or lose, or things like how many home runs Shohei Ohtani will hit this season. You can do it all with FanDuel. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back with Jared Shafran of the Ontario Reign, and there was another player that saw time in LA that I need to ask you about. You mentioned his name briefly, but Akil Thomas, another guy who's had some injury issues as well, finally getting his shot, making his NHL debut, and man, did he make the most of it. 7 games, and he scored 3 goals this season in total with the Reign, 22 goals and 46 points. I'll be honest, I wasn't sure he was going to get a chance to see some NHL time this year, but it was great to see him get in there and do the best that he could. And who knows, he could be a guy now after opening some eyes, maybe get some bottom 6 minutes with the Kings going forward next year. But I did want to ask you about him and how his season has gone.
Yeah, his season's gone about as well as it could have gone. And again, a guy who hasn't really played as many games as he would have liked to, a former second-round pick, someone who, when the Kings drafted him, they expected him to make an impact at the NHL level, but it took a while, and mostly because of injuries. Again, similar to Turcotte, whenever Akil Thomas in his career has been healthy, he's been a major factor for the Ontario Reign. Goal scorer, plays center position, wins draws, and great defensively, plays excellent minutes on the penalty kill. So a guy who can be depended on in all situations. So it just, again, he's unfortunately had 2 different shoulder injuries, and he was out of the lineup for a while. Again, with just like Turcotte, the Kings were saying, hey, if this guy can put it all together, we know he has the talent to contribute. It's just, can he play at the NHL level, and can he stay healthy? And so finally this year, he's been healthy the entire season. Crazy amount of games for him that he's actually going to end up playing. We'll see how far the Reign continue to play. But when you look at it, he played preseason games for the Kings, preseason games for the Reign. I think he played about 10 preseason games. The Kings were in Australia and playing those games in Australia. And Akil Thomas, they still had some games to play here in California. He played against Vegas. He scored a hat trick in a preseason game against Vegas. He scored another goal against San Jose in the preseason. He played against Anaheim in the preseason. He played NHL games in the preseason. Then the Reign had their preseason. Then he played the entire regular season for the Reign before the last month or so. He was up in the NHL. He played 7 games with the Kings. Now he's playing playoff games with the Reign. He's already played in 5 playoff games. So when you total it all up, he's going to end up playing, he's well over 80 at this point. So that's awesome to see. That's great. That's what you want from your minor league players when they can come up and that they're battle tested, that they can get through a long season. But for Akil Thomas, he always had the confidence when he was in the lineup. And this year it's even gotten to the next level because Marco Sturm has had this amazing relationship with him. I think Marco Sturm at the beginning of the year challenged Akil Thomas and said, we need you. You need to be a leader for us. You need to step up. You need to make sure that you're a little bit uncomfortable. You need to push yourself forward. If you want to be in the NHL, you can't just status quo. It can't just be okay in the AHL. You have to be one of the best players in the AHL. And he's had some moments where he has dominated this level. And that's what you need to do to force yourself into the lineup at the NHL level. And again, I don't know that the Kings, again, had him on the radar for a lot of playing time either, but there were injuries. Carl Grundstrom went out. He was injured down the stretch. You had a couple different players that were out of the lineup for the Kings at times. Obviously, Victor Arvidsson was out for a good amount of the season. Those opened up some holes in the lineup. And man, Akil Thomas came flying through the door, scores pretty early on. I think he was very dependable in his own zone. He's a good teammate. A lot of the Kings players who knew him, I think they were really excited that he got that opportunity, and they were happy for him, and they love working with him. He fit in on multiple different lines. Jim Hiller was moving him all around the lineup, and he fit in a lot of those places. So I think the Kings got to see how versatile of a player he actually is, and now they're watching him do great things in the playoffs. He had an amazing pass on the rush last night to set up a goal for Charles Hudon that tied the game in the second period. He, again, has been key on the power play. He's key on the penalty kill. There's so many good things that he does for the Reign on a nightly basis. And again, he's centering that second line. It's been very important for Ontario. So really great to see for Akil because he's such a good guy. So easy to root for. So happy for his success. And again, similar to Turcotte, I think he is in position now where he's played in the NHL. The Kings know who he is. And if he's healthy and ready to go, he can compete for a roster spot next year.
That is Jared Shafran, Manager of Communications and Content for the Ontario Reign and contributed LA Kings insider and Reign broadcaster as well. You can follow him on X, Twitter at Shafran. Jared, thanks for doing this. I know you just got off a plane recently and made time for us. Really appreciate that. Thanks for all the information, and looking forward to talking more as the Kings go forward, or excuse me, as the Reign go forward in their quest to win the Calder Cup this year.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Eddie. Yeah, hopefully we can keep this rolling, and I talk to you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much. All right. We are appreciative of Jared Shafran joining us and look forward to talking to him again down the road. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow, all you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day. Coming up on Friday, another fan feedback show. We've got a lot of things to get your comments on. Rob Blake returning as GM, who the Kings' next head coach should be, which players will be back next season, what Reign players do you think will be on the Kings roster next season and ready to contribute, and whatever else is on your mind. You can send an email, lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE, and always leave your comments in the YouTube episodes as well, which helps the algorithm. We appreciate that. And stay interactive with us by following us on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. Thank you so much for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll talk to you on Friday. And as always, go Kings, go.